There are two Sydney Sweeneys. The one Hollywood created, blonde, sexy, perfect body, $1 million smile. That Sydney sells movies. That Sydney trends on social media. That Sydney is what everyone wants. Then there's the real Sydney, studying scripts at 3 a.m., building a production company, fighting for roles that challenge her, desperate to be seen as more than just beautiful. But here's the problem. Hollywood only wants the first Sydney, and it's destroying the second one. Let's go back to 2019. Sydney Sweeney was nobody. Well, not exactly nobody. She had been acting since she was a kid. Small roles, guest appearances, nothing that made her a star. But she was working, grinding, auditioning for everything. Then came Euphoria, HBO's controversial teen drama that would change everything. Sydney auditioned for the role of Cassie Howard, a beautiful, insecure high school girl struggling with her identity and self-worth. The role required vulnerability, emotion, raw, honest acting. And Sydney nailed it. She got the part. But what Sydney didn't know was this. The role that would make her famous would also trap her. Euphoria premiered in June 2019, and Sydney Sweeney became an overnight sensation. But not for the reasons she hoped. The show was controversial. Graphic content, nudity, raw scenes that pushed boundaries. And Sydney's character, Cassie, was at the center of many of those scenes. Suddenly, everyone knew Sydney Sweeney's name. But they weren't talking about her acting. They were talking about her body. Google searches spiked. Sydney Sweeney hot scenes, Sydney Sweeney body, Sydney Sweeney Euphoria moments. Magazine covers called her the breakout star. But the headlines always focused on one thing, how she looked. Sydney thought she was being recognized as an actress. Hollywood saw something else entirely, a new sex symbol. Behind the scenes, things were harder than anyone knew. Sydney has spoken publicly about the difficulty of filming those intimate scenes. But what she hasn't fully revealed is how it affected her mentally. There was one particular day on the Euphoria set, Season 2, a pivotal sheen for Cassie. Sydney had prepared emotionally for weeks. She knew the scene would be intense, vulnerable, challenging. But when the cameras started rolling, something inside her broke. The scene required her to be emotionally raw and physically exposed. Sydney did take after take, each one harder than the last. And when the director finally called cut, Sydney walked off set. She found a quiet corner, and she cried. Not because the scene was difficult, but because she realized something. No matter how good her performance was, people would only talk about her body. One of the crew members found her. "You okay?" they asked. Sydney nodded. "Yeah. Just, is this all I'm ever going to be?" The crew member didn't have an answer. Before we continue with Sydney's story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our untold celebrity stories. Let's talk about the double standard. Zendaya, Sydney's co-star on Euphoria, is praised as a fashion icon and talented actress. Hunter Schafer is celebrated for her groundbreaking role and artistic vision. But Sydney? Sydney is the hot one. After Euphoria Season 2, Sydney was everywhere. Magazine covers, talk shows, social media trending topics. But look at the coverage. Sydney Sweeney's best bikini moments. How Sydney Sweeney stays in shape. Sydney Sweeney's sexiest red carpet looks. Meanwhile, she had just delivered one of the most emotionally complex performances on television. Where were the articles about her acting process? Where were the deep dives into her character work? Where was the respect? It wasn't there. Because Hollywood had made a decision. Sydney Sweeney is beautiful, and that's all she needs to be. Sydney wasn't going to accept it. In 2020, while everyone was talking about her looks, Sydney was making moves. She started her own production company, 50/50 Films. She wanted control. She wanted to produce projects that showcased her range. She wanted to be taken seriously, but even that was met with skepticism. Industry insiders whispered, "She's just a pretty face, trying to play producer." Casting directors told her agents, "We love Sydney for certain roles, young, sexy, you know. Sydney knew what they meant. They wanted her in roles that showed skin, roles that kept her in the box they'd created. She fought back the only way she could, by working harder. She took on the White Lotus, a completely different character, more mature, more complex, and she crushed it. Critics praised her performance. But guess what dominated the headlines? Sydney Sweeney's White Lotus pool scenes. She couldn't win. Anyone but you. A romantic comedy with Glenn Powell. Sydney wasn't just the star, she was also a producer. This was her chance to show Hollywood she was more than a sex symbol. But the marketing campaign had other ideas. The studio leaned into the hot chemistry between Sydney and Glenn. Paparazzi photos of them together went viral. Rumors of a real-life romance spread like wildfire. And suddenly, the movie's press tour became all about their bodies and their relationship. In interviews, Sydney tried to redirect. The script is really smart and funny. But the interviewer would interrupt. So are you and Glenn dating? Sydney smiled. But inside, she was screaming. This was supposed to be her movie. Her production. Her moment to be seen as a businesswoman and creative force. Instead, it became another story about her looks and her love life. There's a moment Sydney doesn't talk about publicly. It happened during the Anyone But You press tour. She was in a hotel room, scrolling through social media. Every post about the movie focused on her body. Every article about her success included a comment about her appearance. Every interview clip was edited to highlight a sexy moment or flirty exchange. Sydney put her phone down, and she asked herself a question. Is this all I'll ever be? She thought about the years of training, the acting classes, the script analysis, the emotional preparation, all the work she'd put into becoming a serious actress. And none of it mattered, because the world had decided Sydney Sweeney is hot. And that's the story. She cried that night, not because she was ungrateful, but because she felt invisible. The real Sydney, the one who loved acting, who studied her craft, who built a business, was being erased. And the fake Sydney, the one created by magazine covers and viral tweets, was all anyone could see. Here's what Hollywood doesn't want you to know. Sydney Sweeney is one of the most talented actresses of her generation. But the industry has no interest in that. Because talented doesn't trend on social media. Sexy does. Casting directors don't call Sydney's agent asking about her dramatic range. They call asking if she'll do nudity. Award voters don't watch her nuanced performances. They see the headlines and assume she's just another pretty face. And the saddest part? Sydney knows this. She knows that every time she does a scene that shows her body, it will overshadow everything else. But she also knows that if she refuses those roles, Hollywood will move on. They'll find the next young, blonde actress who will say yes. So Sydney is stuck. Damned if she does. Invisible if she doesn't. 2024 Oscar season. Sydney's performance in Euphoria was career-defining. Critics agreed. It was one of the best performances on television. But when the nominations were announced, nothing. Sydney wasn't even in the conversation. Why? Because the Academy doesn't take that kind of performance seriously. If you're sexy, you can't be serious. If you show skin, you can't show talent. It's an unspoken rule in Hollywood, and Sydney knows it. She posted a simple message on Instagram that night. Grateful for the work, grateful for the love, keeping my head up. But behind the gracious words was heartbreak. Because Sydney had given everything to that role, and it wasn't enough. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because Hollywood had already decided what she was allowed to be. But here's what's happening now. Sydney Sweeney is quietly rebelling. She's not doing it with angry speeches or public call-outs. She's doing it the smart way. Through her production company, she's developing projects that showcase her range. She's choosing roles that challenge her. She's using her platform to highlight other women in the industry who face the same struggles. And slowly, very slowly, the narrative is starting to shift. People are beginning to see the real Sydney, the one who's a savvy businesswoman, the one who's a committed producer, the one who's a damn good actress. But it's an uphill battle. Because every time she takes one step forward, Hollywood pulls her 2 steps back. A sexy magazine cover here, A viral bikini photo there, and the cycle continues. So we're back to where we started. 2 Sydney Sweeneys. Hollywood's version, the blonde bombshell, the sex symbol. The girl every guy wants and every girl wants to look like. That Sydney makes money. That Sydney gets clicks. That Sydney is what the industry wants. But there's another Sydney. The one who sits up at 3 a.m. studying scripts. The one who built a production company from scratch. The one who fights every day to be seen as more than just a body. That Sydney is the real one. But Hollywood doesn't care about the real one. And that's the tragedy. Because Sydney Sweeney could be one of the greatest actresses of her generation. She has the talent, the drive, the intelligence. But she may never get the chance to prove it. Because the world has already decided who she is. And changing that story, that might be the hardest role she'll ever play. Today, Sydney Sweeney is one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. She's on every magazine cover. She's in every trending topic. She's everywhere. But the question remains, is Hollywood seeing her? Or just the version they created? Sydney once said in an interview, "I want to be remembered as an actress, not as a body." But so far, Hollywood isn't listening. Maybe one day they will. Maybe one day, the real Sydney Sweeney will be the one everyone talks about. Until then, she's fighting. Every day, every role, every project. Fighting to be seen. Not as Hollywood's creation, but as herself.